Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, written by the Hanged Man 317 and read by Purple Star. Chapter 1. All men are not created equal. Era grinned beneath her mask, a bloody feral thing. She leapt to the next rooftop, rolling into the crunch of her ankles and reveling in how her cuts and bruises ached with every breathless movement. She stood, ignoring the hairline fractures of her legs, feeling them fade into the rest of the background pain as she urged her flagging body to keep pushing onward. It was exhilarating, feeling herself slip past her limits, the strain and snap at her tendons, her muscles tearing past exhaustion. Era didn't like to think herself dependent on anything, but well, she could see herself getting hooked on this. Yeah, all men are not created equal. And sure, she might have gotten the short end of the stick when you took in the big picture, but god damn it, was moments like these that threatened to make everything worth it.
Listening to me?
Oh, right. Hero chase. Escaping the long arm of the law. All that good stuff. She'd gotten distracted again. With the wind in her lungs and the burn of sweat at her brow. This is a good one, she thought. Most heroes didn't give her quite a workout. It wasn't that they couldn't catch her, with enough hard work and some clever quirk usage, but Era worked very hard to make it not quite worth the effort. She could outrun, outlast, could break and contort her body into something that was far more trouble than it was worth. This one, though, he saw something worth chasing. Era wondered, not for the first time, what she'd done to get on this guy's shit list. Her eyes started ahead, flitting across the path before her feet sprung from the edge of the roof once more, reaching out towards the fire escape across the way. She could clamber up that easily enough, make it to the higher rooftop, and then... A loop of fabric snared her across her calf for the briefest moments, and though Era managed to wrench herself free, she found herself tumbling into the cold metal railing of the fire escape with a sickening crack, unable to hold back a groan of pain. Broken ribs. Shit. Those would take a little longer to heal than some measly hairline fractures in her ankles. It would be significantly harder to run with. Still, she considered, it could have been worse. It could have been her spine instead. Paralysis meant no running, and running was all Era knew. She staggered to her feet, prodding her ribs back into place in a futile attempt to speed the process. She knew it would only make things worse, but like a kid picking at a nasty scab, she could hardly help herself. The fire escape stretched above. She'd fallen a little further than she'd initially planned, but she could definitely still make it up quickly enough. Era perched on the railing, beginning to reach up for the next landing before the pain in her ribs became nearly unbearable, blinding her with white-hot agony. Gritting her teeth, she pulled herself up and promptly flopped over onto the metal floor. Okay, this was not going to work. 2 heavy footfalls, and she suppresses a wince. A quick glance above her revealed the hero, whoever he was, had reached the fire escape as well, a few floors up. Hopefully he'd take his sweet time, thinking her already incapacitated, but that would be lucky. And Era never put much stock in luck. She didn't seem to have much of it. Her side burned, simmered, stilled. She felt the uncomfortable sensation of her ribs slowly knitting themselves together like maggots writhing just beneath the skin, eating away at flesh and bone, even as the steady footfalls above her grew nearer. He was light on his feet, she realized, but it was near impossible to be stealthy on metal grating like this.
Are you okay?
He sounded almost bored, but Era knew better than to take something like that at face value. Threat, threat, threat. He was too close. She was vulnerable. She needed to get out, before the walls closing in. Can't breathe. Before he found her, but before he caught her, she needed to run. I need to run. Era sat up, adjusted her mask with a deep, if shaky, exhale. She needed to focus, damn it. The only reason that Hiro wasn't on her already was because he thought she was injured. But she wouldn't be so lucky next time. And if she was going to have a goddamn panic attack every time someone came close to catching her, then she might as well hand herself over right then and there. She shuddered at the thought. Not safe.
You shouldn't have tried for that jump.
He was grumbling now, and Era just grinned back up at him, unsure if he could even see her.
You're gonna get yourself killed.
And Era soured at that, because really? She'd have made it if his stupid fucking scarf? Was that his scarf? If his stupid fucking scarf didn't get in the way. She was of half a mind to say that to his face, but Era wasn't in the habit of dropping clues, and her voice was just another piece of the puzzle she'd prefer to say hidden for now.
Seriously, are you alive down there? I don't want to have to take you to the emergency room.
He dropped down another level, even as Era leaned over the railing to scope out the ground below. It wasn't great down there, but she supposed an escape was an escape.
The paperwork would be a nightmare.
She actually snorted at that, and she heard him pause through the darkness.
Oh, so you are alive, huh? That's good, probably.
Another level, closer and closer, and in a fit of what could only be childish anger, Era decided that she'd play this recklessly. Let him know how little she respected him. Maybe then he'd get off her fucking ass and realize there were bigger fish to fry than a small-time vigilante who didn't even have a visible quirk, who had nothing better to do than lead heroes on a wild goose chase. Maybe the disrespect would get him to leave her the fuck alone. She should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Fuck, she probably did know. No one this stubborn, persistent enough to chase her down several blocks over rooftops and back alleys, would let a slight like that deter him. Reckless, immature, childish. She could berate herself for this later. Now, with the precious ache of her injury slowly fading to a dullness and the memory of flying through the air fresh in her mind, Era heaved herself onto the railing and sat there, lazily swinging her legs back and forth as the hero dropped down to her level. He met her eyes, though Era knew he couldn't see them through the mask, but that only covered the top of her face, so Era was certain that he saw the feral grin beneath it as she slipped from the railing and into the darkness below. Shit! Oh, yes, the scarf. She'd nearly forgotten about that. Reckless, naive.
You are just a child, little bird.
Era shook off those thoughts as the scarf slipped around one arm and tugged. She suppressed a yelp, but just barely, instead only letting out a hiss of air between clenched teeth as her shoulder was ripped from its socket. She understood why he'd done it, too, which was the worst part because she should have been able to predict it. Of course he was willing to risk her getting injured if the alternative was just letting her plummet several stories to her death. Fucking heroes. God damn it. The scarf began to pull her upwards, and this time Era couldn't hold back the breathy gasp of pain. Her shoulder was on fire, and since it was only the point of suspension, she couldn't maneuver herself without using it. Oh well. Era twisted around, ignoring the grate of bone against bone and the waves of agony that followed as she tugged a knife from her belt and began to tear against the scarf. It was tougher than most, because of course it was. But this was a very good knife, and the hero had seemed to hesitate after it was clear that he was hurting her. So maybe, just maybe, she could get out of this without... A second strand of fabric lashed out from above, wrapping around her torso and pinning her knife hand to her chest. Ah, perfect. Just fucking perfect. A million scenarios ran through her head as the hero dragged her up, most of them catastrophic. Era forced herself to settle, to breathe, to remember who she was and what she was capable of. It could be worse. Yeah, she thought, unbidden, as the hero lifted her back up into the landing, a scowl on his face. But it might well get worse soon enough. Great. Thanks, Brain.
What was your plan?
Simple, brusque, a hint of anger behind it all, but honestly not much to go on. It unsettled Era, made her think and overthink, sent her spiraling into what-ifs, pressing her lips into a resolute line she didn't answer. The hero narrowed his eyes, and she felt the scarf constrict ever so slightly. A warning. A threat. Oh, now this was familiar territory. She could deal with those. Era ignored the way her shoulder twinged and repressed the urge to smile into the pain. This wasn't the time.
How old are you?
Straight to the meat of it then. Although Era was a little surprised. It was dark and she was practically covered head to toe, half mask on her face complemented by a large hood and cloak, as well as simple, baggy clothing. Although, of course, the aforementioned hood hung loose from her neck, displaced by the fall. She schooled her expression, determined to betray nothing. The hero sighed and pulled out a phone.
Hey, Tsukauchi? Yeah, I got her. She's younger than the report, I think. Not saying anything. Yeah, I'm sending my location right now.
Ugh. The police. Era played with the pieces in her head, sorting out the hysteria from something that would actually be useful. He called her young. Seemed surprised. Era could sound younger than she was. Older, too. It was a matter of practice, of pitch and inflection. Sir? My shoulder is... It really hurts. This was not exactly a lie. Her entire left side felt like it might be on fire, but she'd compartmentalized the pain almost instantly, stowing it away for later, or perhaps never. Didn't seem like useful information.
Yeah, probably dislocated,
said the hero gruffly. Era blinked. That didn't work. Change tactics. You're, She coughed, wincing, letting a little hiss of pain escape her lips. No? Nothing? Jesus, this guy was cold. You're not gonna tell my mom, are you? Another sigh.
Look, kid, I'm not an officer, but I'm pretty sure you know the answer to that question.
All right, well, he was talking. That was better than nothing, right? There had to be something. All she needed was for him to let her go. Just for a second. All she needed was a second and she could be...
You've got some moves, kid. I'll give you that.
He leaned against the wall of the building, setting her down gently, which she appreciated, although the scarf was still tied around her body. What was this thing? It seemed pretty handy, although she couldn't think of a scenario where she could actually use it, so maybe she'd just file that away for later. Sympathy. What was the right play here? Era gave a short laugh. Let it be broken and just a little wet. Yeah, well, I had to learn fast. Anything? Maybe? No. Oh, yes, there we go. A shift in stance. The slightest inkling of interest.
Meaning?
You know. She trailed off, glancing down into the side. Fuck, this was harder when they couldn't see your eyes. That's what really sold a lie. In her opinion. They were the first thing to give you away, true. But if you could really get a handle on them, then the possibilities were endless. He was silent, and she let him be silent. Let him think he was getting the information out of her, making her squirm until... It's not easy. My parents aren't easy. I just wanted something that was mine. Oh. A little too much anger in that one. A little too raw, too much truth, and... Fuck, she thought she'd gotten past that. Naive once again. To think she'd ever be able to get past that. Think she'd ever be able to live without him breathing down her neck.
Kid.
His voice softened. Just barely. Just enough.
How old are you?
Era could feel the binds begin to loosen. She shifted, as if the question made her uncomfortable, then winced where supposedly her shoulder had been jostled. That pain was still tucked away somewhere, but she knew what it should feel like. She let her voice take on a wavering defiance, just enough to sell a child, but not enough to make her seem too strong. She needed to be weak for this, though it left a foul taste in her mouth, made her fingers twitch. Why do you care? Silence again. A man of little words, it seemed. Not that it mattered all that much. Era had him. She was sure of it. Hook, line, and sinker. Another, final sigh.
I'm gonna take a look at that shoulder.
It's fine. I'm fine.
This isn't a conversation.
He leaned forward, and for a moment Era saw the faintest, warmest kindness in those eyes, past whatever cold, brusque persona she'd been seeing. Oh, that almost made her feel bad for what she was about to do. Almost. The cloth loosened. The man reached for her shoulder. Era propped her leg beneath her, muscles tensing, and she swore that he actually noticed before she moved, although it was too little too late. Era surged forward, slamming the top of her head into his nose. The scar fell away entirely, though she knew it would be short-lived. Have to act fast. A sharp fist to the stomach, kick to the inside of the knee, and another vicious elbow to the face as he fell. Down and out. Era reached down with trembling fingers, pressing against the skin beneath his chin and sighing in relief when she felt the flutter of his pulse. There was just... She knew it was the nose, but there was just a lot of blood, and for a moment she was... wash out no matter what And... walls are closing in. Can't breathe. But he wasn't dead. She hadn't killed him. That meant she was good, right? Good people left their enemies alive. Still, something about it didn't sit quite right with her. Maybe it was the brief flash of realization? Betrayal? Or was she projecting? In his eyes before she slammed into his face. Maybe it was that he'd cared. Really cared about the lie she told him so easily. She reached up beneath her mask to pinch the bridge of her nose, knowing it would do nothing to stem the looming headache. Shit. Sorry, she muttered to the unconscious body at her feet. No, that wasn't good enough, was it? What would a good person do? Well, for starters, probably not get into this situation in the first place.
Hilarious. Very helpful.
A siren in the distance. The brief flash of red and blue reflected from several blocks down. She needed to get out of here, and she still hesitated. Well, she didn't have a pen, but there was a lot of blood. Both hers and not. It was probably a little ominous, but it was the best she could do. Era stepped back, straightening out her cloak, and flipped her hood up before clambering up the fire escape and disappearing over the rooftop, just as an officer stepped warily into the alleyway.
Eraserhead?
The officer called. Huh. Era turned that over in her mind as she leapt from an AC unit to a crumbled piece of wall, gripping the exposed brickwork. That must be the hero's name, then. She'd have to look into it. Shouta stirred groggily, wincing as he staggered to his feet. He felt like shit, and he probably had another concussion. Oh, Shisenji would never let him hear the end of this. But he was still alive, and honestly, it could have been worse. Could have been much worse. He cursed himself for letting his guard down so easily, for letting a child get the drop on him like that.
Should have known.
There was no way a kid like that would go down without a fight. It had been too easy, and he should have known. Eraserhead, you up there? You okay? Tsukauchi was calling up to him from below in the alleyway. Shouta allowed himself another groan before he leaned over the railing to peer down, wincing as a flashlight passed over him. Light sensitivity. Definitely a concussion.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm fine.
He managed to climb down to the ground without too much stumbling, although it certainly wasn't as graceful as he'd have liked, and Tsukauchi definitely noticed.
Sparrow got away.
That much was probably obvious, but it needed to be said all the same. The detective sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was optimistic to think you'd be able to bring her in on the first night. She's proven to be elusive.
I had her.
He didn't elaborate. Let the barest amount of anger in his voice tell the story for him. She's slippery, Tsukauchi offered as if it were some condolence. Are you injured? That's a lot of blood. Shouta waved him away.
It's nothing. She just got me in the face. My nose is broken and I probably have a concussion, but with a doctor's quirk I'll be fine.
Tsukauchi nodded, opening his mouth to speak, but hesitated. Shouta narrowed his eyes.
What?
Well, began the detective, you did say that she seemed younger than the report suggested. Did you find anything else out? Her quirk, maybe?
Aizawa hummed,
drumming his finger against his arm.
She's young, but I don't know how young. Pulled some sob story on me. Don't know why I fell for it. Not sure how much of it is true, if any. You're right, that kid is slippery. And manipulative.
Tsukauchi snorted. Yeah, to get your guard down? Some sob story.
It's what she didn't say. She knew what she was doing, I'll give her that. As for Quirk...
Shouta sighed, rubbing at his aching face, wincing at the throb of his nose. Huh. His nose was broken. Just like her ribs. He'd heard them crack when she'd fallen. Honestly, he'd been a little concerned that it was more serious than it was. And still she'd managed to climb the railing, slipped from it with no regard for her safety.
Not sure, but might be some sort of regeneration. Don't quote me on that.
Gotcha. Tsukauchi jotted something down in his notebook. We should get you to a hospital, then. This is enough of a statement for now, but we might need a more official report.
You're getting serious about this one, then?
It was not a question, but Tsukauchi still seemed to treat it like one. Yeah, she's been lurking around for weeks, said the detective with a shrug. At first it was just another kid in a cape, but this is getting ridiculous. She's got a name now and everything.
Shouta huffed. A name and a costume. That's when they get insufferable.
Well, I'm glad you're on the case then. Tsukauchi shut the notebook with a short slam and tucked it away, grinning at the scowling hero.
I never said I would take this case. I just said I'd check it out.
Oh, come on, don't tell me you're not intrigued. Besides, there was a glimmer in the detective's eyes. Seems like you have a bit of a score to settle now, huh?
I do not have a...
Shouta cut himself off with a hiss as his nose gave a particularly painful twinge.
He sighed. I'm going to do my job, just like you.
Sure. Tsukauchi was still grinning. The bastard. Just let me know when you catch her again, okay?
Hey!
Both men looked up at the officer calling down to them, from where Shouta had been knocked unconscious by an already restrained child. Seriously, you really should have known better.
I think there's something written up here.
What does it say? Called Tsukauchi.
Not sure, it's a little...
And Shouta was already there, reaching for the flashlight even as his head pounded. Just had to get this over with, and then he could get patched up and finally sleep. The thought should have been a relief. And yet, as he passed the flashlight over the wall, his headache only intensified. Sorry for punching you. Hope you're okay. 14, if you still care. Sparrow.
Oh, this was going to be a long night.
End of Chapter 1.